Be'ez Hashem Yisbarach, we begin Perek Echad Asa, the 11th Perek in the Rambam's Hilchos Ishut, the laws of marriage, which are in the Sefer Nashim. Which the Rambam is continuing the theme of Kedushin, getting engaged. Then we talk about the time between the Kedushin and Nisuin, getting married, which the Rambam in the previous Perek described what exactly marriage is, Kenisa L'chuppah, and that one of the prerequisites is to have a Ksuba written, and that the Rambam continues in this Perek regarding the amounts of the Ksuba, the monies that he promises in the dowry, and also Tainis Basulam, which is his claim to go ahead and say that, oh, well, she's not what I thought she was, so that he doesn't have to pay the Ksuba of a Basula. Some of these we're going to discuss in today's Perek and Pechad Echad Aser. The Rambam is going to explain to us how much is the Ksuba, the marital document of the dowry of the Basula, of a virgin, whereas that of an almana, of a widow or a grusha, or a divorcee, a ba'ula, a woman who had already had cohabitation, a mukas eitz, if she didn't have basulim because of some other procedure. Begeres is a girl who is over a certain age and maturity that could affect her basulim. That of an islandess, who is a woman who is not able to have children, has a different type of development. That of a summa chareshes neshaita, a blind woman, a mentally deranged or a deaf-mute woman. Also, if a chershet v'katan, a deaf-mute or a mentally deranged or minor gets married to women. That of, as it applies to ger and geyeris, a woman and a man who convert. And finally, regarding tainis, that of the husband's claim of besulim, where he didn't encounter any virginity, that of the dam that comes from besulim, or the concept known as pesach besuach, where he found it open, it wasn't closed in that area, which generally is the case if she's a besulim. So Rambam begins halacha aleph, starting off with what's the amounts that are required in the ksuba. So halacha aleph says Rambam hanoisa besulim, if someone gets married to a virgin, shenis almana, where she was widowed, or shenis garsho, or she was divorced, or nechlitzo, or she had chalitza. Now how's she a besula? Because im min eris in this almana, if she was widowed from just being engaged, or she was divorced, or she had chalitza done where her husband, when she was engaged, he died without any children, she had chalitza done. So ksubasa masayim, her ksuba is still going to be 200 dinarim from her second husband, because she's still the basula. Now, vim min hanisuin, but if let's say she was widowed, divorced, chalitza from that she was already married, then ksubasa meya, then her ksuba from a new husband is going to be only 100. The reason is shemishanis is because the moment she got married to her first husband, harehi kibuula, already consider her as a woman who had cohabitation, even if there's witnesses that she did not conceal herself with the first husband, or right after the chuppah the husband died, doesn't make a difference. We right away give her the status as that is beula the moment that she gets married. And also if someone marries a virgin that was originally a maidservant and was freed, or if she was a convert, a shavuya, or she was a captive that was redeemed. So if the maidservant was freed, and the non-Jewish girl, if she converted, or in the other case, if the captive was redeemed, when she was younger than 3 years old, then ksubas and Messiah, then her ksuba is going to be 200 dinar. Because even if, as we suspect, in her state of captivity, or when she was not Jewish, or as a maidservant, that she had bia, but those bisulam, those virginity, actually comes back, as the Ram is going to say shortly in Halacha Gimel, when a girl is under 3 years old. So even if there was bia, it's going to come back. But if she was older than 3 years old, ksubas and meya, then we suspect that she already had bia, and therefore we treat it as a ba'ula, and therefore ksuba is only going to be that of a ba'ula, which is that of 100 dinar. Halacha base. So Rambam explains, why for these women did the sages institute that they get only 100? Even though they're virgins. So the reason is, since the presumption is of a married woman that she's going to have bia, so that's the first case we had discussed in Halacha Aleph, and also the other cases. And we have a presumption that a maidservant and a non-Jewish woman and a woman that's taken in captivity, that they're going to have bia. So since they're fit for bia, they're a situation where in their state of captivity, or as a non-Jewish woman, that there's going to be bia happening. So even though in these cases we know definitively that she actually is a basula, her husband died right after the chuppah, so she's married, but there was never any bia, we know she's a basula, still this goes into the takana. Since generally in these situations there is a presumption that bia happens, so tiknu leila meya. So they instituted for these types of categories a ksuba of 100 dinar, bein nivelu, bein loy nivelu, whether they had bia or they didn't have. And therefore for all practical purposes we treat them as if they already had cohabitation. Now halacha gimel. Mukas eitz, which literally means to say that she was hit by a piece of wood, which she fell and she hit wood, and that made her besulam, the hymens, the virginity, to be lost, as Ram is going to explain later on in Halacha Yud. Ksubasameya, she's also not a besul anymore, although she's not a be'ula, she didn't have cohabitation, but she's not a besula, so her ksuba is 100. Afilan, this is amanashi besula shlema, and now, even if he gets married to her, with the stipulation that she's a bona fide, complete virgin, the nimtzis mukas eitz, comes out that she doesn't have besulim. Because of whatever the procedure was, that she lost her the virginity, ksubasa meya. She's going to still have the ksuba of 100, meaning the chiddush in this is that we don't say, oh, it's a mekach tais, this was a mistaken acquisition, where she shouldn't deserve anything. No, since she didn't have bia, so that's not considered as a mekach tais. In contrast of, let's say he would find out that she already had cohabitation, then she wouldn't get anything, as Rambam say later on Halacha Yud. She's not going to get the ksuba of a besula, but it's not considered that of a mekach tais, a mistaken acquisition, because she never had relations with another man. She just doesn't have the besulam, so therefore she's going to have a ksuba of 100. Now, here's where the Rambam explains what we had alluded to earlier. A girl younger than 3 years old that had cohabitation, even if it was an adult that had relations with her, when she gets married, her ksuba is going to be 200. Why? The hymens come back like all regular girls that have the virginity. So, because even though as under 3 she had bia, but it's like putting a finger in the eye where the teardrops keep on replenishing. That's how the besulim come back. And so too, if she was an adult, but a boy younger than 9 years old had relations with her, still her ksuba is going to be 200, as if she didn't have bia at all. Why? Same thing what we say with the girl under 3 that it comes back. Because only a boy that's over 9 years old is his act of cohabitation qualified as a bia. Less than that is not qualified as a bia, and therefore we still consider her as a besula, and she still has the besulam. We're just saying that the act of having bia, which removes her from being that pristine state, which makes her a beula, a boy under 9 doesn't have that capacity, and therefore she's still going to be treated as a besula to get a ksuba of 200. Now the Rambam moves on to women that the rabbis did not institute for them a ksuba. Halacha dalet. Besula, a girl, a virgin, she begettes, which she's over, let's say, the minimum of 12 and a half years old, which is it's 6 months after becoming a naida when she brings the sign of adulthood. A suma, or she's blind, or islandess, or a woman that can't have children, that I'm already explained this in Perek Beis. Ksubas Masayim. So these girls, the ksuba is 200, just like any regular besula. Now, but a deaf mute woman or a mentally deranged woman, like tiknul and ksuba, the rabbis did not institute for them a ksuba document at all. Now, hashaita, actually a mentally deranged woman, like tiknul and nisun kalash, she doesn't even have the halach of marriage at all. Now, so on that says but a deaf mute woman, although rabbinically the rabbis did institute a halacha of her getting married, but on that still like tiknul ksuba, they did not institute for her a ksuba. Kadesh so that people shouldn't hold back from marrying her. It's like it's a financial liability. I don't want to have to give her a ksuba. But if it's there's no charge over here, so okay, I'll get married. If I want to get divorced, I get divorced. It's not going to cost me anything. And we want a chereshes, which has a more of a handicap, and we want people to marry her, so that we didn't institute for her benefit a ksuba. Now, moreover, so based on that, just like she does not have a marital dowry. So neither does he have an obligation now to feed her, because the obligation of feeding is considered as the conditions and stipulations of the ksuba. So if she doesn't get ksuba, she doesn't get that mezainis either. And therefore, neither does she get any of the other stipulations of the ksuba, which is that he has to take it to the doctor, or redeem her if she gets taken captivity, which the Rambam explains later on in Perek Beis, all these obligations. Now, let's say he marries the woman when she's deaf mute. But then she actually gets healed. Yes, like ksuba tonight, ksuba, then she gets a ksuba, she gets the stipulation ksuba, ksuba sameya, and her ksuba, however, is going to be only 100 dinarim, simply because she was already beula once they got married, and now is when the obligation starts. But now that she was healed, he's going to have the regular obligations of a ksuba on his wife. If he marries a deaf mute or mentally deranged woman, and he writes for her a ksuba of 100 mana. So ksubasin keyemes. So the ksuba is valid. So to speak, the Rambam says he wants to destroy his properties. No one asked you to, but you obligated yourself, so now you're obligated in your obligation, and you have to give that amount. Halacha vav, if he's a deaf mute or mentally deranged, where the woman he marries has all her faculties intact, even if it ends up being that the deaf mute becomes healed, he becomes able to speak and to hear, and the mentally deranged man becomes also sane, their wives don't have anything on their husbands because they don't have intelligence, and their original stipulation is not a stipulation. So although they obligated themselves when they got married, that has no standing. Now, but if they want to stay married after they got healed, then yeshling ksuba, then they have a ksuba, ksubas meya, and now that they're already bu'ulais, so their ksuba is going to be 100. Now, Vin Bezdin, now if it was the courts, they married off the deaf mute person. And they wrote for the woman, we want to make incentives, we want someone to marry this person, so they wrote a ksuba for her on his properties. Then they tell us kamasha kasla bezdin. Then she does take whatever the courts went and wrote for her, because we know he would want to, although he doesn't have das, but if he would want a maidservant to serve him, wouldn't we go and buy for him and as the courts help him out? For sure here he's getting a wife and he gets someone helping him in the kitchen and also someone that's taking care of his marital needs. So for sure that it's our responsibility and he's obligated in what the court did for them. Now that's regarding a cheresh. But a mentally deranged person, the courts never do such a thing to marry him off. I meant this by, and since the institution of the sages is not going to last because you can't live with such a mentally deranged person, so therefore they did not institute for him, even rabbinically, that of getting married. And so regarding a minor, which generally those three are put in the same category of not having das, for a minor, they didn't make rabbinic marriage for the minor, because ultimately he's going to reach the age where he's going to be able to have regular biblical marriage, so therefore he did not institute rabbinic. Now, if that's the case, so then why did the rabbis institute rabbinic marriage for a minor? One day she's going to be able to get married. Why, when her father passed away, she's an orphan? The rabbis made it a rabbinic marriage, which that's where miyun applies when she wants to leave that union. Why did they institute? Why did the girl live and then a boy? Oh, that says the Rambam because we don't want people to treat her in an ownerless type of way. Because if there's no one there that's the man in her life, her father is dead and she doesn't have a husband, so then people are going to act promiscuous with her. So therefore, they instituted rabbinically a marriage for the minor. Now, the emasin is a cotton, and we don't marry off a minor boy until we check him. Like we said, there's no rabbinic marriage for the minor, so we don't marry off a young boy until we check him that we know that he brought the signs of adulthood, and then he could go ahead and get married. Now halacha zayin, katan afila ben teshel miyamecha. Now regarding a minor boy, even if he's over 9 years old, which we had said before that his bia is considered halachically like a bia. Let's say he had relations with an adult woman. Shanasi isha. Let's say this 10-year-old boy gets married to a woman. Ain't like ksuba, she doesn't get a ksuba. Again, we said there's no marriage for a minor boy, even though, so to speak, his bia is a bia. Now, vim higdal, now if he becomes an adult, vikima achash higdal, and he stays married to her after he's already an adult, then yesh leika ksuba, then she gets the primary ksuba, that of what's coming to a person that had bia, which is going to be that, now she's already a bu'ula, so she's going to get a ksuba of a mana of 100, because at this point she's already bu'ula. And something applies to if, let's say, there was a non-Jewish couple, that him and his wife converted, and now they're Jewish, now they want to keep Jewish law, ksuba samana. So the ksuba document is going to be 100, because she's already ba'ula too, and shamanas can't kima, it's for that intention that he's sustaining her, maintaining her with, which is her status as already a ba'ula, and therefore that's his obligation of 100 dinar as a ba'ula. Now, halacha ches, the Rambam now moves on to related discussion regarding him wanting to diminish or make her lose her ksuba regarding a claim, what's called tainis besulim, the claim of her virginity. Says the Ram Halochas, kol besulish ksubasim asayim, any virgin that her ksuba is 200, which we said most girls are, there are some exceptions like we mentioned, yesh la tainis besulim. So the husband can have what's called the claim against the hymen, against the virginity, which if he comes and he claims, says, I didn't find her to be a virgin, she'd lose her whole ksuba, as the Ram is going to explain. Now, in contrast, any woman that her ksuba is only 100, half of that of besula, like if she was widowed from a marriage, And we said that even if she didn't even have seclusion with her husband, the husband died right after the chuppah, still we gave her halachic status like a ba'ula. So any woman that her ksuba is 100, or if, let's say, it's a woman that the sage didn't even stoot for her ksuba at all, for example, like we said, a deaf mute or mentally deranged, and he writes a ksuba for her, with the presumption that she is a basula, doesn't make a difference. These women, he does not have a claim about virginity, because that's only to make her lose what a basula has, which is if he's paying a ksuba of 200. But the fact that what he wrote himself, or for when she's getting 100, which anyway she's getting that of bula, even if he thinks that she's a basula, then he doesn't have this rights of claiming that, I didn't find her to be a virgin. And so too, if someone secludes himself with the woman that he's halachically engaged to before he does marriage, that girl, he does not have a claim of virginity, because maybe he cohabited and he forgot, and therefore he cannot make such and stake such a claim. Now halacha test Ram now explains what is this claim of the virginity. So this is Zeshanasa Isha. So this refers to a man who marries a woman, which the presumption is that she's a virgin. That was the understanding when he's getting married to her. The Toyin Ba'im, and he claims and he says, I didn't find her virginity. There was no hymen, which is the muscle in the genital area that's generally closed, and there, which has pockets of blood when there's the first act of bia, which removes that of the basulim. Now, the Rambam explains, which is very important for the claims that he's going to make, there's two signs that a girl is still a virgin. First of all, is damim sheshaisin mimeno b'seif birushayin. It's the blood that drips out from her at the conclusion of the first act of cohabitation, because that was there, which is then punctured, so to speak, or pressed, that removes the blood at the end of the first act of cohabitation. The second sign of virginity is hadoichik sheyimtza ba. The tightness, the pressing that he finds with the male member, the first act of cohabitation during marital intimacy, that's the second sign of virginity. Now, again, the whole claim here is to make her lose her ksuba, but regarding the husband's permissibility, if she's not the wife of a kohen, that we have no problem with at all, because that would be two doubts. First of all, maybe she had the bia before the kedushin. That wouldn't be a halachic problem on him. And even if it was after the kedushin, maybe she was raped, as the Rambam explains this in Hilchos Ishut. So the whole discussion we're having over here says, she's not a basula. What happened over here is only a concern regarding him claiming that he doesn't want to pay the full ksuba. So Rambam goes in Halacha Yod and he says, so he says, someone marries a virgin, again, that this category that we're talking about, because we're talking about referring to the halachas of ksuba, that's what comes here in this parak. Where the Rambam, everything has a connection, understanding for his flow. Where the ksuba is 200 dinar. The Ton Vam, and he claims and he says, I did not find her to be a virgin. So we ask her, what's going on over here? If she says, it's true. Yes, he did not find me to be a basula when we had relations the first night. I had a fall, I had an accident, vikani eitz karka, and I hit wood or the ground. This is the concept known as mukas eitz. And the hymen, which is that muscle of the virginity, it's not here anymore. She's believed what she's saying. And yeah, he's not going to have to pay a ksuba of 200, because that's only if she's a basula, as we said previously regarding if she's a mukas eitz. It's not a mekach tois. He's not going to say, okay, I don't have to pay anything. It was all a sham. It's not true. She's not a bu'ula, but he's not going to have to pay that of basula. It's going to be 100 instead of 200. Now, although he's claiming, he's saying, wait a second, how do I know this to be true? Maybe a man had relations with you and you don't deserve anything. And it turns out you were really bu'ula and it's a mekach tois. No, we don't pay attention to his claim, because her claim is definite. She's saying this is what happened with her, and his claim is a doubt. And this was known as bari v'shema. When you have a definite and a doubtful claim, bari adif, the definite claim, is the more sound claim. Now, however, he does have a right. V'yeshloi lahachrim stam. He can make a generic chayrim, which is an excommunication, shalei ba'ala ish, that to guarantee that no man had relations with her. Because it's not definite. In other words, he cannot require her out of his doubt that she should have to swear that it's true, but he can make a chaim in general and say, whoever has removing money from me that I'm not obligated, because he's saying over here, I don't know if I even owe 100, should have a chaim on them. And that's a takana of the Gainim, which is brought in the Rif, that whoever comes a claim with a shema, like he is, and he could make such a thing. And the Rambam in Hilchos Talmud explains the laws of the cherem, but he could make such a cherem statement. Now, halacha yudalf, Amar, let's say she says, Emes Amar, it's true what he's saying. Shleimit tzani besula. He didn't find me when we had the first relations. He didn't find me as a virgin because v'ish ba'alai ba'inus. It's true. I didn't say beforehand, but a man had raped me. Achar shenisarastila, but it was after that we already were engaged, which that means my ksuba is 200, because when the besula is engaged and then a man rapes her, I was already your wife when we halachically engaged. It was your mazel that caused this to happen. It was under your watch that I was raped. But although we never had relations, so you didn't know that, but we already married, which is what kedushin is, already an eishes ish. And Harizin the man, she believed to say what she's saying. And her ksub is going to be still 200, like it originally was. Now, Vimta and Vama, but if the husband's claiming, he's saying, how do I know? Maybe you were raped before we even got engaged, and therefore the acquisition, the whole engagement, was on mistaken premise, and you don't deserve anything because you were not a besula. Or maybe he says, I don't know, maybe after we were engaged, maybe you actually had infidelity, you had relations with another man willingly and you weren't coerced. How do I know? So again, she's a vada and he's a shema. Hariza machim stam. So you could just make a generic cherem, amisha tain sheker. Whoever's lying over here, who is going to get this cherem, who wants to make me obligated monies that I'm not responsible for. Again, he can make a cherem to make her swear he can't, because again, it's a bari b'shema, and moreover, the woman has a cheskes aguf. She has a presumption in her body which supports her that a woman is born as a besula, and we presume that the chazak is there as long as we would say it is, and therefore it must have been that only happened after she was engaged and that she was raped. So therefore, she gets 200, and he just gets to make this cherem. Now, halach yud beis. Let's say he claims and he says, I didn't find her that she was a besula. V'hiamer, she says, what is he talking about? He didn't have relations with me. I'm still a besula. We didn't have any relations the night of the chasna and so on. So Baikin says, okay, so this is a verification of facts. We check her where, as the Gemara says in Ksubas, where it's debated if that's applicable today in these days, that a bu'ula, that if you put her on a barrel of wine, you can have the aroma coming out of her mouth because it's going through her body and conscious besula, it's closed over there. But be that as it may, we check her. We see if she's still a besula or not. Or if we could do something else. She could go ahead and have cohabitation again in front of witnesses. Now, that doesn't mean the actual act of cohabitation, because that's forbidden to have relations in front of other people. It just means that they're secluded in front of witnesses and they prepare like a cloth beneath them when they're having relations to see if there's drops of blood after the biyah, and that will verify and tell us that she's still a besula if there's the dam besula that comes out afterwards. Now, Amra, let's say she says, Ba'alai. It's not true. We had relations. And what is he talking about? He found me a virgin like all other virgins. This guy's a liar. So we ask him and we tell him like this. What was this thing at Shamar to change besula that you're saying? You're coming here to court. You're saying she's not a besula. She's saying she was, and you're saying she's not. So imama, if he says, says I'm not a liar. I learned the halachas beforehand, and they're supposed to be dam besula. There was no dam that was there. Okay, so then boidim b'mishpachta. So we check her family. We do DNA. Shema ein lehem dam klal. Maybe they don't have blood. There are certain families that didn't have this blood in their anatomy. Loidam nidav, loidam sulam. They don't have menstrual blood. They don't have the blood of virginity. So in Nimtzu Kul and Kain, if we see all the women who start asking around, we say, yeah, we didn't have. So it is a b'chaskasa. So then she has the original presumptive state that she was a besula, and the fact that there's no dam, that's because that's the family type. Now, let's say loy nimtzu b'nais mishpachtakin. Let's say we don't find, there's none of the family, none of the girls in the family have this of not having dam. So then we do a different check, a different test. Maybe she was really not well. Which actually dries up the moisture in her limbs. Maybe she was fasting, a famine, or she wanted to get a shidduch, she was fasting. So that dries her out, and therefore there's no moisture in the body, and therefore maybe that's why there was no dam coming out. So what we do is martiva naisa. Says the Rambam, we moisten her up. We take her into the bathhouse, machil naisa, and we give her to eat, mashka naisa, we give her to drink, until she becomes healthier, more robust, and then mitibol shainis, and then do have active cohabitation the second time. And then we'll see if blood's going to come out or not, because maybe that was just because of a physiological reason that no dam came out. Now, but let's say there's no illness, no hunger, but nothing like that. So that's what the Rambam says. This is what's known as Harezer Tainis Besul. This is what's called the claim of virginity, as the Rambam explains. Even if he found it that there was a pressure when he was having cohabitation with the woman, but since no blood came out, that must be there's no virginity over here. There's no hymenal to have the hymenal blood. As the Rambam explains, every virgin has blood. Whether she's young, whether she's old, whether she's a little girl, naira, which is when she just became an adult, or begeris, which is 6 months later. Unless there's some type of illness, like we explained. So therefore, if he's saying there's no dam, that's his right to make such a claim, and he's believed, and she's not coming with any vaday taina, like we said. She's just saying that I was, but there's no dam over here. So he has the rights to stake this claim. Now, let's say he says a different reason. Like we said from the Rambam, there's two simanim of virginity. Let's say he says, I didn't find any tightness. Famous sugi, I found an open doorway, that means to say that the vagina is open and there's no hymenal that's blocking it. So then Shayla now regarding this, the age does make a difference. Regarding dam, the Rambam says there's no difference. He's always going to believe with tainis besul. But regarding the Pesach Besuach, then we ask her how old she is. Shema begerisi. Maybe she's already begeris. So the Rambam, that Shareva Baigris ain't lan daichik. Oh, Shema Gishim Bayharba, that the most Baigris, you don't really feel so much of a tightness, even after the first act of cohabitation. Shadei Gadla, she already became older. The Nisra Bebra, and her limbs already loosened, but Kol B'Salah, and that already removed the virginity of the tightness of the muscles of the hymenal. Now, so if she's already over begeris, that's not a claim. Not vim loy bagardayim, but if she's not even yet a begeris, so we tell him, and so then it is interesting why there was no tightness. That would sound like that she already had bia already. So we tell him, shemehi teisa, maybe you were at an incline, which you could avoid the besulim. So maybe you had cohabitation very slowly, which will therefore you didn't feel any tightness, because if you do it very slowly, so that eases up the body and the woman calms down, and therefore that's why you didn't feel any tightness. But it doesn't really mean because the besulim weren't there. If he says loiki, no, it's not the case. I came in strong, I went straight. So then obviously it really was open. So this is another type of claim against that there was no virginity. For any virgin, as long as she wasn't yet a begeris, whether she's a minor, whether she's already a naira, whether she was healthy, whether she was ill. Because any girl that's a naira, even though she's already a naira but not yet a begeris, that's a virgin, the opening should be closed. So on here, even if blood came out, since we found an opening, in Kambesulim, this is the Rambam Shita, there must be that there's no virginity, so he could have either claim, either that there's no dam, or either that there was no tightness, what's known as Pesach Besuach. And he has the right to make this claim to not have to pay the ksuba of a Besula. Now, Halacha Yud Gimel. It says Yesh Goyim Shahayru, there are some great Torah giants that they ruled Shahabegeres, in other words, they say the inverse of what we just said. They say that the Begeres, when she's over, let's say 12 and a half, Ein Latain is damim, to the contrary. Then there's no more claim of bloods, because there's no more blood coming out anymore when she reaches a certain age. But V'yesh Latain is pesach, but he actually does have the claim of that he found it open. Why was it open? It should be closed. Which is the exact opposite of what we just said. To which the Rambam says, the way of the Gemara doesn't seem to indicate the way they're saying it. And actually, it actually was an error in their text of their Gemaras. And says the Rambam, says, I already checked many different texts, and from the earlier ones, I found that it's like how we explained, to the contrary. The only claim you have for an older girl is that of the claim of blood, but not for Pesach Besuach, which is the exact opposite of the girsa that those Goinim had. Now that moves on, Halacha Yadal, regarding the belief of a claim of that regarding the Besulim that they weren't there. So Halacha Yadal. The Rambam explains why does he have the right to make such a claim. So it was the sages that they instituted the primary ksuba document for a woman, that she should get this ksuba when the marriage gets dissolved. They also instituted, and they said, Shakala 20 times Besum, this went into their original takana, that whoever makes the claim of that there was no virginity, and the woman denies him. So again, we have a claim this way, claim a counterclaim. Neman, that the husband is believed to make her lose her ksuba. Why? And she has to bring the proof. Loyalish, not the man. The Ram explains why. It's a presumption. No man would go through the effort of preparing a chasna. We all know what it costs, and create a loss, because if he didn't like her, he would not have put in the whole effort and made the whole chasna for nothing. He would have divorced her right away and saved himself money. And he's turning his joy into mourning. Obviously, he would never have done such a thing. And if he's making such a claim, which is to end this, obviously was because he didn't find the besulam, and therefore the chazaka is telling us that what he's saying is correct, and she would have to bring proof to counter that. Now, and that's because the husband, he's the one paying for the chasna in the way the Rambam codifies it, and therefore again he prepared all that. He wouldn't want to cause a loss. How long does he get to make this claim about not having found besulam? So it depends. If they were secluded, so miyad, it has to be immediate. But he can't go ahead and make a claim at a later point in time, because once he already secluded with her, he most definitely cohabited with her. And if he was silent up until this point, most definitely she was a basula, and that's why he was quiet, and now he's upset, so he's making up some type of a rumor. He's like, I'm just going to start spreading rumors about you. So if they were secluded, it has to be right away. But if they didn't seclude, it could even be 30 days later. As long as they didn't seclude, so they never had biyah. And whenever it was, after a month or two or whatever, that they finally had biyah, they could come the next morning and make the claim in court. Now, Allah design. All the great ones, the Gainim, they ruled. This that the sages said, that he's believed, even if his wife denies him. That's all of Sida Ikar Ksuba. There's a lumdus over here. That's only to make her lose her primary ksuba, which we said, interestingly, is a takan's chachamim, and the chachamim themselves are able to say, okay, we believe the husband, because this chazak, he wouldn't go ahead and want to gain 100 dinam when he lost thousands of thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars for a chasna. But the additions that he promised, or which he could add on, as we had previously said, previous parak, more than what the primary ksuba is, that yeshla, that actually she does get, because that Tosefes is not because of the Kanz Chacham, it's because he willingly obligated himself. So that's like all other halachic obligations, which you cannot remove your obligation without a definite proof. Like the Vilna Gaon says the Ksuba is rabbinic. The Tosefes is a gift. A gift is biblical. The Chacham cannot go ahead and remove his gift, so therefore he has an obligation of still giving it. Again, unless unless it's known from a clear proof that she already had cohabitation, or if she admits that she was a bula, that she really had cohabitation before they were engaged, and she had misled him. And whoever gets married with the presumption that it's besula, that's going to be a mekach tois. So lefikach, therefore, in other words, since we're saying the whole ability of her collecting is because of the document of the ksuba that he wrote for her, so regarding this, meaning this addition, which the Tosefes, which she gets to take, we said, because that Chacham cannot uproot his biblical obligation of his matana, so she's going to get that. So then, yesh lahashbi b'nekitas chayvetz. What he could make her swear by holding an object. Generally, a holy object is, the Rambam says in Hilchos Ishut, you hold like a Sefer Torah in your arm and you stand and you swear. He can make her swear kedin kol neshba menaitlin. There's halacha, what's known as, generally people swear to defend themselves. There are some cases where people swear and they take, which in this case, she's swearing to take, because she's coming to collect, and she's swearing. So when anyone comes to swear and collect, you can make them obligated in an oath, of what's called the Shvuas HaNaitlin, which you hold a holy object and you swear on that, and then she go ahead and collect the additions that he had promised her, which again is the case in any time, like a collector, like a lender is coming to with a document to collect something, the borrower can make them swear by holding a holy object, and here the husband is no different. He can make her swear shvus hanayim. Now, the ein lo lahashbiyai. Now, it doesn't work the other way around. She can't make him swear. Shleimitza besula, swear that I wasn't a besula. And then only then will I lose the primary ksuba. In other words, we're saying she's collecting the tesevas and she's losing the primary. So wait, just like she has to swear with the Tesefes, maybe he should have to swear for the primary that she's losing. No, we don't say that. Like we said before, because there's a chazaka working for him, a presumption. No one's going to put in the effort for a meal and then cause himself to lose it. So therefore we believe it even without an oath. Now, but Yeshla, but she does have a right, lahachim stam, like we said that he had in other cases, she has a right to make a general chayrim. Whoever's making a false claim against her, which is here she's losing a primary ksuba because what he's saying, she doesn't have a right to make a swear, but she has a right to make a generic chayrim. Halacha Yedzayin. Let's say after this whole debacle, this whole thing, he wants to stay married with her. Where he already made her lose the primary ksuba because of his claim, where he has a right to make 10 pesulim, and she loses it. Now the thing is, he's not allowed to stay married to her now, even if he wants to. Like we said, let's say if she's the wife of a kohen, and the husband is claiming that he found her a beula, so then she's going to be forbidden on him out of doubt. Because maybe after Kedushin was the Bia, and even if she was raped, she's going to be forbidden. But let's say we're talking about a Yisrael that makes the claim. So she's not forbidden on him, because like we had previously said, there's two doubts. Maybe the Bia was before Kedushin, and even if it was after Kedushin, maybe she was raped, which if a woman was raped, she's permitted to her husband, which that's not really applicable in today's days anyway, because we do the Kedushin, the ring, by the chuppah, and no man is secluded with the kala until after the couple already consummates their marriage. So most definitely, if he would find a be'ula, actually she would be permitted to her husband, even if it's a kohen, because obviously this nus was when she was single, not when she was married, so she wouldn't be forbidden. But be that as it may, if he wants to stay married with her after he made a lose a ksuba, so then he has to go ahead and rewrite for her. Now it's not going to be Masayim, because she's a be'ula, because she already had relations with her. He's going to write for her a ksuba of 100. And the reason why is Levisha Asla Adam Lishas and Mishra Sha'ach like Ksuba, it's forbidden for a man to stay married with his wife for even one moment without Ksuba. Kamesh Ba'an, like I already explained in the previous parak in Parak Yud. And therefore, again, this is like we said, it's not for Issa Beheter. This whole parak that we're discussing regarding the claims that Time Spoon is making was regarding the monetary obligations. He's like, hey, she's not what I thought she is. And he could be believed. Okay, now what do you want to do? If you want to stay married, so then you got to go ahead and write a new Ksuba for the woman, albeit that of a mana of 100 dinar.